And so I'm like walking out the door. I'm picking up my first generation iPhone, about to call my parents, be like, one of my dreams is about to come through. And no joke, as I picked up the phone, it is an LA area code. And I picked it up. Hi, this is Erica, like not knowing. Hi, this is Julie from Toyota. I just wanted to let you know that you have been accepted into the Toyota Management Training Program. And I literally was,
oh my God. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the I'm a Car Chick podcast, and boy, do I have the car chick for you guys today. I don't know in my 2 years of doing this that I've ever talked to somebody who is as much of a car chick as she is. So without further ado, you guys got to talk to her. Her name is Erica Bruno. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Shasta.
Hi, I am so happy to have you on, and your history, you and I got to do a clubhouse room last week, 2 weeks ago, at some point. Everything blends together.
I know.
I got to hearing your story, and I mean, I just couldn't believe it. Like, you have literally your entire life been involved in a dealership in some way, shape, or form, which is uncommon to hear of nowadays from really anybody, but especially women that have been involved for that long and know that much about the automotive industry. So I know I've touched a little bit on your background, but I do want you to talk about, how you got your start in auto and how it led you to where you are now.
Yeah. So technically I was born into this, but my official start actually started with my grandfather. He had over 17 different franchises at one point in time. He was a huge Chrysler dealer, and one day, I was joining him at his Dodge store, and I used to love to go with him all the time. But I asked him for a My Little Pony, and he goes, okay, you're old enough now, you got to earn it. I'm like, okay, great. Like, what do I got to do? And he was like, you can clean my office for me. And at the time, I did not know that he had a cleaning crew, like every week, but I scrubbed it from like the ceiling to the floor. And, at the end of it, he gave me $5. And I was like, immediately, like, I'm staring at this $5 bill. I look up at him and I'm like, wait a minute. I cleaned your office. I got $5. What else can I do, to get more money? Mm-hmm. And he was like, I knew that in there, like, you were into it. You were hooked. And so, I've done everything from washing cars to selling cars within a dealership. Even as old as 10 years old, being a receptionist in his RV store, and his RV rep coming in and going, who's the high schooler? Because I've always been really tall. Who's the high schooler? Who's your new receptionist? She's really good. And he's like, that's my 10-year-old granddaughter. And so, like, I've always loved it. My mom was the 7th female Toyota dealer principal in New England, in the nation, first in New England. And, like I said, I've loved this industry for a really long time, and my family didn't want me to stay in the industry. They kind of wanted us to get out and see other things. And I said, okay, well, if the agreement is I have to go to college, get a degree, after that degree, I get to choose what I want to do. And so, going through college, my parents kept checking in, like, are you sure you still want to do the car business? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And so it was one of those where, my senior year, my dad was like, if you're serious about this, you should apply for Toyota's management training program. Toyota is the best. They will give you the best foundation. And if you do that, you're going to have to move to California. I was like, all right, let's do it. And so I applied, interviewed, and at the time it was 2008, 2009. And so Toyota was in a hiring freeze. And I will never forget the day, because it was a pretty incredible day where I got the offer, and I was like, I guess I'm moving to California. So.
Wow. That's a big move, especially from New England. Did you go by yourself?
Yeah. So the funny story about that day is, so I'm a singer, and I was doing a musical theater intensive at my college, because I hadn't heard from Toyota. It was about a month after graduation, and my theater teacher was like, hey, like, you're really talented. We should get you into my intensive, because he worked with a bunch of people for this school in New York for Broadway, like one of the best Broadway training schools in the world. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, I can't wait to take this. Maybe I, get a little bit better at my singing or my acting. And Shasta, I'm telling you, this was like intense. Like, I thought the main guy hated me during this like 2-week period. And by the end of it, it was a recital that you had to sing this song. And I sang Everything I Know from In the Heights, which, I dedicated to my grandfather because he taught me everything I know. And I'm going to try not to cry during this, but I'm going into, the last rehearsal, and he's like, I want you to sing this like you're singing it to your grandfather. And I got into it. I sang and I like started bawling when I finished. And, I get up, I had to go to work. I worked at the student center. So I'm walking out the door, grabs my bag, and he's like, hey, hold on. What are you doing after this? And I was like, I got to go to work. And he's like, no. I mean, like with the rest of your life. And I was like, oh, I'm waiting to hear from Toyota. I'm hoping I get into their management training program. And he goes, well, what if you come to New York? And this place was notorious. Like, you could not even attempt to get into an audition, let alone actually be accepted. And I'm immediately like, I get to audition? Like, oh my God. And he goes, no, that was an audition. You're in if you want to go. And
oh my God.
And so my two dreams, joking growing up, I know we were talking about my degree before we started recording, but my two dreams were either to be on Broadway or to be like a strong female in the automotive industry. And so I'm like walking out the door, I'm picking up my first generation iPhone, about to call my parents, be like, one of my dreams is about to come through. And no joke, as I picked up the phone, it is an LA area code. And I picked it up. Hi, this is Erica, like not knowing. Hi, this is Julie from Toyota. I just wanted to let you know that you have been accepted into the Toyota management training program. And I literally was
oh my God.
And so I am not a runner, but I booked it to our student center because my boyfriend also worked there at the time. And I ran like a mile from the theater to the student center, and I burst through the doors in the office, and I'm like, where is Kurt? My boyfriend at the time. And they're like, he's upstairs. And I booked it. And all I could hear was my boss, who had given me a recommendation for Toyota. And he's like, did you get Toyota? And I burst through the doors. And keep in mind, I still had both things in my mind. And I saw Kurt. And the minute I saw Kurt, the first words out of my mouth, not even thinking, were, I got Toyota. And internally, I was like,
there's your answer.
I was like, I guess I made my decision. So, like, long story short, took a second. I was like, and Broadway. And he's like, wait, hold up. Like, time out. Like, we need to talk about this.
Where did Broadway come from?
Yeah, he was like, hold on. Like, I thought you were at musical theater practice, and now you're here. Like, what is happening? And so we sat, and I called my parents, and I called my grandparents, and I'm talking to everybody. And of course, my parents are like, you should take the paying job. No one's getting paying jobs. And my grandfather goes, what's your heart saying? And I said, Papa, the first words that occur out of my mouth were, I got Toyota. And he goes, then your heart spoke. And I will never forget it. And so I had 2 weeks to pack my apartment in Vermont, to move back to Massachusetts, figure out what I was bringing with me to California, a lot of vacuum bags, and packed it up. And moved to LA by myself at 21 to start my career. And so I was...
That is such a young age to move to LA by yourself. Holy crap.
Yeah. And so, I joined Toyota's management training program for July 2009. And I was one of 10 people for the management and automotive tech training classes. Because like normally these classes would have like 20 to 30 people each. So because of the like hiring freeze, we were jokingly called like the golden class, like only the best got in. And like, it was such a whirlwind. And so I was at Toyota altogether about almost 6 years. But we were also there during the pedal recall for Toyota. So that was a fun time. Yeah. And then, I was there for 18 months in headquarters, learned a ton. And then got promoted to the Chicago region, where I spent the next like 4.5 years. So
this episode is brought to you by Epic BDC, your number one outsourced BDC solution. Learn more about Epic BDC by checking out the link in the bio.
Yeah, it was a wild ride, but it was really fun.
So in the management training program, did it focus on management of the whole dealership, just service and sales? Like, how did that What was that training program like?
Yeah, so the first 6 months you're in a call center, whether it's Toyota at the time, Scion, or Lexus, and you had to learn how to, address customers and customers' complaints. And then we went out for about a month, and we were doing rotations. So you did rotations in warranty, dealer operations, market management, all this different stuff within the OEM just to learn it. And I had went to warranty, and so I was all excited because I love fixed stops. Like I did a lot of service stuff in the dealership. And no joke, that's when the pedal recall hit. And then we had to go back to the call centers to help with the overflow for, all this accident cases and everything else, which at the time was awful, like terrible. And
yeah.
But I say now it's honestly the best training I've ever had in my life. Because, as I called my dad one day being like, I can't do this. He's like, this is going to be a moment in your career. You look back and be like, if I can get through that, I can get through anything. So,
yeah.
But yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, they teach you everything about not just the OEM, but also the dealership too. So like we did NADA statement training, NADA parts obsolescence training, like all of it. So
how long was the training program itself?
It could vary anywhere between a year to like 2 years. It really depended on what the regions needed at the time, because you were basically farmed to a region, whether it was Toyota or Lexus. So
gotcha. And then, so I want to go back to something you said earlier when you were talking about picking between that and Broadway, and you said one of them wasn't paid. Was it Toyota that wasn't paid?
So Broadway technically wouldn't have been paid for. It would have been like, I would have gotten in and my tuition would have been covered, but I would have still needed room and board. So I would have had to find a job on top of it. Whereas with Toyota, it was a paying job. And plus 2009, depth of the recession. I mean, I had friends who couldn't find jobs for years. So I was like, I'm really lucky I can't turn that up.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, I got to go back to moving to LA at 21 is insane, like for anybody. But how was that, moving to an area where you didn't have family? I assume all of your family's in New England.
Yeah.
And then going to this whole new area where I'm assuming really the only people you know are the people you work with. How was that when you're that far across the country?
So that was a really interesting time in general. So my senior year at UVM was also a really transitional period because the summer before I had actually had gastric bypass surgery. So I was previously 325 pounds. I lost over 100 pounds. So I came back to, college 85 pounds later. And that was a whole big adjustment. And then to go from, New England, where I grew up and I knew it, to LA, which, if you've been to LA, it's a very superficial place. And all of a sudden we'd get comments like, oh, how much more do you want to lose? I'm like, more? This is the tiniest I've been in my entire life. Like, I'd be a skeleton. Yeah. But, I think my friends joke that like, oh, Erica's the most adultiest of us because she had to like leave home really early. But I think that, LA really taught me that at the end of it all, no matter what is thrown at you, like you can survive it. You can get through it. And I had, thankfully, one of my best friends had just moved to Arizona for a teaching job. She ended up living with me for a while. And then I have some really incredible people that, again, are still in my life from Toyota that, I joke I will always probably bleed Toyota red because like they really became part of my family. So, I'm really blessed that I had that opportunity to start my career with such a really amazing company.
Yeah. And you got to start really kind of at the top with the best level of training that they have to offer, where you're not just getting trained in a dealership where you don't know who's going to be the one training you in the dealership, how watered down the training you're getting is. Like you're getting trained from Toyota themselves, which is really quality. So you moved from LA after you finished the training program to the Chicago region, and you said you were there for a year and a half?
4.5 years.
How was that? 4.5, yes. So how was that? Were you at the dealership level?
Yeah, so when you start in the region, you start as a regional analyst. So I was one of the only regional analysts for a little while. And so you're supporting all of the different departments, service and parts, marketing, dealer management in general, market management. So making sure, who gets a franchise, when they get a franchise, why they get a franchise, distribution. So how the cars are allocated to the dealers, what reasons someone might not get a car allocated to them, how the allocation system works, Also the legalities of everything, owning a franchise, not, standing up to the franchise agreement, I guess is a good way to put it, and how that is tackled. But it was tough at first. I had some management that just really were not very supportive. Just like I'm a Boston girl. I'm a little fiery at times. I get passionate. It's not like an angry, fiery. It's a passionate fiery. Like, no, we can do this. We can get this done. And I had a manager who, looked at me and said, if this industry does not tame you, I will. And I walked out of that office and I said, not over my dead body. Like, never again. I will stay untamed. And so, I think that's where I'm glad I didn't lose that, because I know along my path, I've had a few people who have tried to, put that out in me. And I'm like, they don't get to control that. So, but
I love that.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that, like, Chicago to me was another training ground of, some difficult times, but really understanding who I was and why I was doing what I was doing. Because especially to, I unfortunately had the title of a dealer kid, and a lot of people are like, well, you're lucky. You're a dealer kid. You're just going to run home and you're just going to this. I didn't have a home to run to, like it was either I made this or I didn't make this. And so again, like, people have their perceptions about you, but you ultimately know who you are. And I just kept moving forward and moving ahead and saying, you know what, I want to learn more and I want to be more. I don't want to be that stereotypical lazy dealer kid that doesn't know anything, and that was the part that anytime I've had any type of adversity in the past, I now realize it's only made me who I am today. And I get to share that experience and hopefully make it easier for someone who follows me.
Yeah. And it's really impressive that when you had that moment where you were faced with that manager who said he wanted to tame you, that you're like, no, that's not going to happen. And I'm probably going to be fiercer on the other side because of it. That's just real confidence in yourself and knowing I'm worth more than what you see in me right now.
In any of my other jobs, because, I have been at a few different companies now, but any of my other jobs where, someone's like, well, I'm being told no, or I'm being told you can't do it this way, or you can't this, I kind of share some of my background and say, hey, I understand if, there's no way to do it or it's not a priority right now. But at the end of the day, keep learning, keep researching, trying to find a solution. Because if you can bring a solution to the table, then that's something that, no one can say no to.
Right. So how was the transition when you decided to make the move out of Toyota from that corporate level? Was that a hard decision? I mean, I'm sure after being with them for so long, it wasn't easy, but what gave you the confidence on the other side that you were ready to move on?
Yeah, so it actually was a really deeply personal decision. My nephew was on the way, my first nephew. My uncle had just been diagnosed with cancer. And, there was a lot of family stuff going on back home. And just like...
This episode is brought to you by SCP Agency, your one-stop shop for organic social media. Check them out by clicking the link in the show notes or visit scpagency.com.
This need for, a little more stability, and I knew like they needed the help. And so, but at the same time, I kind of needed it too. Like I kind of needed my family. So I was like, look, like, is there any way with Toyota or Lexus, could I get closer to New England? It doesn't have to be Boston. I understand my parents are technically dealers. Like that's not allowed. Could you get me to New York? Could you get me to Atlanta? Like someplace on the East Coast. And they were like, no, not really. That's not going to work. And I'm like, all right, then I might have to look at some other options. And so I kind of like casually mentioned it to one of the girls I started with at Toyota. And she had just left Lexus to go to Infiniti. And she goes, hey, Nissan's hiring in New England, I think for, basically a FOM role, which is like a district service and parts role. So basically a, similar role. And I was like, well, yeah, if it's within New England, I'm into it. And so it was Vermont and New Hampshire, which I was like, back home. Yeah. And so I interviewed and I got it, and Nissan was great. Like I tell people Nissan was another very important stepping stone to not only bring that OEM knowledge and experience that I had in the past, but to elevate it in a different way. You know, Nissan was not afraid to take risks. Nissan was structured very differently. Nissan also just had a totally different like DNA than Toyota. So it was really interesting to see the way that, you know, they worked with their dealers versus like Toyota worked with their dealers, which was very different. And, you know, having some of that experience in the past definitely helped me, you know, grow a little bit faster within Nissan. I was a FOM for about 7 months, and then I got promoted to be, you know, what they call a DOM or district sales manager over Maine and New Hampshire. And, you know, it was tough. Like it was difficult at times, but it really taught me a lot, and it got me to the sales side, which ultimately was like my next on my checklist of like, okay, I want to master, you know, service and parts. I want to get into sales. And then ultimately I was looking towards getting to marketing. And so, you know, I was killing it with Nissan, loved it. And then I got a recruiter on LinkedIn who reached out to me and was like, hey, like, you got a great background. Would you ever consider, you know, marketing and like tech in automotive? And I was like, maybe, but like, I got a good thing going on. So like, talk to me. Like, why should I do this?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? And it was for Automotive Mastermind. You know, I was one of the first 100 employees, and the recruiter said, we predict who's ready to buy, why they're ready to buy, and when. And I was like, okay, now as a car girl, like, you got me. Like, talk to me. Like, how does this work? And so I started interviewing for that. And I had asked Nissan too. I was like, look, like, I don't mind being a field rep for a bit, but I do want to get into marketing. What's the timeline to get to marketing? And they were like, that's going to be a little difficult because within the region, you know, there's nothing right now, but like maybe at headquarters, 3 to 5 years. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, do I want to wait 3 to 5 years to get to marketing if I could do something now? And yeah. And so I was, you know, that was a tough decision because I loved my management. Like my RVP, who actually just retired from Nissan, I saw him at NAMED like 2 years ago, and like still a great guy, great relationship. And that was really hard to say, hey, I know you saw, you know, the pearl in me, but I need to take this. Like, I need to try. And I will never forget what he said to me. And he looked at me, he's like, Erica, you should, you know, like you should, like you've got talent, you're smart, you know, see where this goes. And if it doesn't end up well, like you could always come back. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And so, you know, I ended up taking the job with Automotive Mastery, and like I said, one of the first 100 employees. And I loved it. Like, I was like, I'm hooked. Like, I am a geek. I love data. I love helping car dealerships, you know, be better. And, you know, I actually helped with like the field training. I helped, you know, launch stores. I helped launch the first Infinity store in Alabama by myself. Like, there were so many moments from Mastermind that I'm like, wow, that elevated me in such a way that I never would have had on the OEM side. And just understanding, and now looking back, I'm like, dang, that was smart, because like no one was really looking at data as the future, you know, and that's really where I started with my data side of my, you know, career. And then unfortunately COVID hit and layoffs happened, and yeah, I didn't get out of bed for a solid month because I was like, wow, I'm such a loser. I can't believe I lost my job. Like, what am I going to do? And, you know, looking back on it at the time, I was devastated. But now I'm like, that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it gave me a chance to stop, to heal, to figure out what I wanted to actually do. And, you know, it was an interesting time, as we were talking about before we started recording. But, you know, I think ever since then, I've really followed my heart and really put myself out there in a way that, you know, I never would have prior. So I'm really proud of, you know, everything I've done in the last few years. And long story short, that's how I ended up here at Recall Masters. So
it's such a cool story. I mean, you have so much experience, more than I would say half of this industry combined, because people are in and out so much, or they don't pay attention, or one reason or another. But you have really been on every single side of this thing and seen it from all facets. And I got to know, the burning question is, with the level of experience that you had, what was it like jumping from the dealer OEM side into the vendor side? And, you know, what was the biggest thing you didn't expect to be different, but was? You've made it this far, and I have to say thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to rate the show, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and of course on all social media channels. Light it up.
Oh, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing that I don't want to say surprised me, because like, especially growing up at dealerships and working with dealerships, obviously I heard this is this rep or this is this rep, maybe we take them seriously, maybe we don't. But I think, the openness of some dealers to accept the help, that some of these reps, are willing to give. And, it's a bit of a trust game, and I get it. Like, you have reps who are, hey, I'm just here to do my job and sign off on a checklist and see ya. And then you have reps that, again, I try to be, and I'm like, here, I want to be a partner with you. Like, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. Like, I am here to try to help your business be better. And, there are some really great dealers that even to today, like, I actually am meeting with one later this week who's like, is that the Erica Bruno? And I'm like, Brian, like, I missed you. But like, that's the type of relationship that I want to have. And sometimes you get on the flip side where you're like, wow, that vendor's really bad. Like, I can't believe they did this, like.
Yeah. It's tough too on the vendor side when the dealer doesn't match pitch with you. Like, you go in and you're like so excited for this relationship and you're all bought in, and then you're like getting 1-word answers from them and they're not getting back with you, and you're like really trying hard to help you here and you just don't seem like you want it.
Yeah. Or even better is like the dealer signs up for something and then the GM is like, I didn't approve this or I didn't want this, and you're like, okay, like I'm just trying to help.
I'm here to teach you whatever you want to know.
Exactly.
We were talking a bit in the beginning about how several years ago you got involved with WOCAN, which, if anybody listening doesn't know, is the Women of Color Automotive Network, was born in 2020?
Yeah, right around George. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So born in 2020 or founded in 2020. And how do you feel that has helped you kind of build your network, build with other women? Because I know that before we started recording, you said that was a really big passion of yours, was getting to help raise up other women. How has that been detrimental in your success?
Honestly, it's been vital. Like, I have grown so much in the last 5-ish years, which is crazy to think of. But like, when I joined WOCAN, like I shared, I had been laid off from Mastermind because of COVID, and I was just really in not a great mental state. I was pretty depressed. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And, I had always kind of hung with the boys. I was a tomboy growing up. Like, that RVP that I mentioned at Nissan, he was like, Erica's like one of the boys. I love her. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm one of the boys. But it was really hard for me to find good girlfriends. And I didn't really find good girlfriends on a personal level until college. And then, in the industry, I had, onesie, twosies, but I just felt this need for, a better connection with other women, because I was so passionate about, seeing the way my mom had been treated, in the early 90s, being a female GM and then also a dealer principal, one of the first. And then even myself, some of the things I had encountered. And I was like, I want to give back and I want to be a part of a group that makes sense, like I feel like I belong. And so, I joined on a WOCAN meeting and we were just talking about life. Like, hey, how's everybody doing? Like, we're all isolated. Like, how's life? How's this? What have you experienced in your career? And I remember I'm in a breakout room and we were talking about, just the comments we've had about our hair and how many times I've been told, you should really straighten that. You'd look a lot more professional. And yeah, and like, and other women who, again, African-American, Asian, they're like, oh yeah, I've gotten similar comments of like, why don't you do your hair? Or why don't you wear a wig? Or why don't you this? And it's like, or like Mabel's a good example, no hair, oh, well, that's not okay. And it's like, it was mind boggling. I'm like, oh my God, we all have these types of struggles. It's just different layers. And so how do you not only as a woman in this industry overcome some of these things, but once you have these extra layers added onto you, how do you overcome that? And a lot of it really is just, your allyship and, having that safe space of like, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. how would you guys handle this? Or what should I do that maybe I didn't think of?
Yeah. And it's so needed. It's so needed. And it's things that like I would have never even known about, like, because number one, I would never say shit like that. But number two, like, my hair's straight as a freaking board. So like no one's gonna talk about my freaking hair. If anything, they just tell me, will you please fix your hair? Will you please fix your hair? And I'm like, no, it's messy bun today. But it's things that we need to connect over, because we never know when we're in a position that this is really, really wrong, because it may feel a little bit wrong to us, but then when we have a chance to ask somebody else or talk to somebody else about it, no, you have a real problem there and you really need to do something about that, because we just want to think that these people have our best interests in mind. If it's our boss or someone that we work with, we would never want to think, oh, you're being an a-hole to me. Like you're just opinionated or whatever excuses we give them that they don't need. But we have to be able to connect on these things and have outlets to go to and fix these issues as they happen so that they don't happen again.
Yeah, because like a great example is, one of my first jobs out in the field, a manager touched me inappropriately, and I was ironically with my manager at the time, and we're walking out of the dealership, and I'm like first shell shocked. I'm like, I can't believe he just touched me. Like what just happened? And I said to my male manager, and I said, he just he grabbed something on our way out that I was not expecting, and what should I do? And he like looked at the ground, looked back at me, and he goes, you just met him, so you should probably just play nice. And I remember being like, this man will never protect me, and it wasn't until the third time this same man touched me that finally I had management protect me. And it was a man of color who was like, you are not going back there alone or being with him alone, and it was an eye-opening moment for me, because first off, I never should have been silenced in the first place. But secondly, like, it shouldn't have taken the third time for someone to defend me, and I realize now they were basically expecting me to fail. They were just waiting for me to fail. And so they were waiting for that quick, whoosh out the door. And when I didn't fail, then all of a sudden they were like, oh no, she's actually worth keeping. Maybe we should help her. And that's the part that I'm like, no woman, no one, doesn't matter gender, should have to go through that.
Seriously. I mean, that's what keeps women quiet and keeps them from speaking up, is the fear that nothing's going to be done.
Yeah.
And it's so dangerous. I mean, and it keeps them quiet when it does happen, when it's severe and way over the line. I mean, they're all over the line, but when it's bad, it keeps them quiet for fear that no one's going to do anything anyways, or I don't have any proof, or how, it's going to be my word against his, and he's in management and I'm not. Like, you got to speak up no matter what.
Even after that third time, when, thankfully one of my higher up managers protected me, and, my DM joined me, we had a meeting with the GM. And in that meeting, the GM's like, I am so sorry. I can't believe this happened, blah, blah, blah. The minute my DM walked out the door, he looks at me and goes, are you sure? He's a good family man. And I go, you know what, sir? After the first time, I would maybe agree with you. But after the third time, especially since I told him no multiple times after that, like, please do not touch me, that's not okay. But that just goes to show the type of mentality that, unfortunately, the boys club, if you will, because that's really what it is, does. And it's harmful to the men and to the women. That's the part that, I think a lot of men now understand. But
did you know that there's a monthly newsletter where you can keep in touch with everything that I'm a Car Chick podcast is up to? There is. Check out the show notes below. And you can also follow us on all social media and stay in tune with whatever we're up to.
It wasn't that way 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah. No, I would say, I feel like for the most part, it's gotten better. Yeah. It doesn't mean it's 100% fixed, but I mean, my time in this industry, I feel like I have had more good men in my corner than I have had good women. And I know how blessed I am to have that, because of all the work of the women that went before me.
Yep.
And the men that went before me who did things wrong and were put in their place or didn't stay in the industry, and the good men who see us as allies and see us as equals and are willing to treat us as such and be there for us and, I was talking to somebody at a CRM company the other day from NADA 2 years ago, where we were at the Brad Paisley concert, and this group of dealers were a little bit too drunk and crazy and just kept making those comments, those just little bit too uncomfortable comments, and started trying to follow us around. And we locked eyes with some friends of ours, some guys that worked at a CRM company, and somehow they just knew and immediately came to our sides, played fake husbands, and walked with us the whole way out. And it's like, those are the guys that I don't even have to say a word. They can see what I'm going through, and they're there. And it's not that we need saved or rescued, but to know when you're not in your hometown, when you're in a scenario like that where you don't know who's following you, you don't know where you're going, to know that you have somebody else to have your back. And I would have been just as happy to have a group of women with me too, but I feel like that would have hurt instead of helped. But but I mean, we need all of that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like with WOCAN, like I always know someone has my back, and I have a lot of men too that I always know they have my back. And I think that's the part that we need to celebrate more in the industry is, like having each other's backs, wanting to make things better. And I think, again, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, absolutely, it has totally made that happen, especially with things like, like a Sodu and, car dealership guy and all this jazz of like trying to make each other better. But that's the progression I want to see is like, let's make that even stronger.
Yeah. And it really just takes celebrating each other. I mean, it sounds like we got to make all this progress and do all this stuff, but really lift each other up. Like that's starting point number one. And you'd be amazed when you're in the mindset of how can I help you? How can I lift you up? How quickly you will see a change.
100%. 100%. And that's honestly what I feel like I mentor more on is just like resilience and just, staying the course. Or as my grandfather would always say, keep your eye on the end goal. Is like, what's the end goal that you're trying to accomplish? And like, keep walking towards that. No matter if you're walking through fire, if you're walking through water, if you're walking through whatever, doesn't matter. Just keep going.
Yep. It's such an important message because so often we just get kicked down and want to stay down or, don't feel like we've got the firepower behind us to get right back up again. But you just got to keep trucking along.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to be up to events-wise this year? Are you going to be attending anything cool?
Yeah, so I'm going to be at a SodaCon. I'm excited for that. We have our member breakfast there, so that's going to be great. I'm trying to see if I could get to a few more ones, but right now that's the only one as of today.
You mentioned NAMAD earlier. Are you going to try to make it to that one?
Yeah, I would like to try to get out to NAMAD. This is going to be the first year it's in Vegas, too, so I'm like, ooh, I love Vegas.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it was the first year in Vegas. I'm like, oh, man, that's interesting.
Yeah, because it's been in Miami the last few years, so like it's kind of a big transition from Miami to Vegas. So I'm excited to see how that's going to go. And like I said, I'm hoping I will be there. Got to figure out a few financial things first. So those are always fun.
Right. Felt this year. What is the best way for anybody listening to connect with you, and if they have questions for you or just want to grow with you or whatever, how's the best way they can connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very active on LinkedIn. A part of my story I did not share is I ended up going viral on LinkedIn after I was laid off because I wrote a post of, everything that I learned. And I'm really, really blessed for that because it brought so many incredible people into my life. So that's how I mainly use that platform is, hopefully teach people, some of my lessons, but also help them and figure out, hey, how can you grow? How can you get better? What do you want to accomplish?
I love that. And now I've got to go find that post because I don't think I was using LinkedIn back then. And so I definitely didn't see it, but now I'm going to go find it.
It was crazy. I remember being like, I just thought I just wrote something like kind of nice, like a nice little status being like, oh, hey, here I am a year later and this is what I've learned. And all of a sudden it was like 20,000 views, 40,000 views. I'm like, what? I was like, how do you know you went viral on LinkedIn?
No, what's the standard?
I was like, I don't know what this is. Because I've never, it's funny because even now, like, people are like, oh, you're like an influencer. Oh my God. Like they recognize me and I'm like, oh, this is weird. Like that, but cool, but weird. Like it wasn't the point of putting myself out there. But now I tell people, put yourself out there because you never know what could happen. So many of my jobs, like, Volvo, Constellation, Experian, so much of it is because of the networking and the experience that I had and being able to talk about that, you know, and how much I've learned. And so, like, you never know what is waiting for you on the other side if you put yourself out there.
Yeah. And you never know who is listening or watching and who needs the message that you're about to give.
Yes. The other thing I love too is, like, I can't tell you how many times I've had people who never interact with my stuff. Never. That RVP was actually a really great example. He's maybe interacted with one post, and he came up to me at NAMED and he was like, "Can I say how freaking proud of you I am?" And I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "First off, I've loved watching your journey, and I've loved watching, like, your stream of consciousness and, like, how you've grown." He's like, "But I'm really proud of you that you haven't stopped." He's like, "You got to keep going and you got to keep sharing, because, like, that's how you're going to be something someday." And I was like, "Thank you." Like, try not to cry right now.
Right.
But
you really never know who's watching it. I mean, it's wild, because especially those people from your past, and they come up and say something like that, and it almost kind of like jacks your head up, like, what all have you seen me do? Like,
yeah,
how much have you been watching?
well, and, you know, I've shared a bit of myself, like, on Facebook and personal things, you know, especially with, like, my gastric bypass surgery. And, like, even when I first started to share, because people, you know, are naturally curious. They're like, "How'd you lose all the weight? What happened?" Blah, blah, blah. And I had someone be like, "Aren't you ashamed? Like, why would you even talk about that?" And I'm like, first off, I'm not ashamed, because I think shame is the biggest thing that holds us back in the first place. I was like, but not only that, like, why would I lie to someone? Like, if someone's had the same type
Right.
of struggles I've had, I'm not going to tell them, "Oh, I had a great diet and I just worked out all the time." No, like, if anything, hopefully it helps them, or it helps them make a decision that's great for themselves. So, like, that's kind of my personal philosophy, is, like, if I can share pieces of me that can help others find that piece in them, that's totally worth it.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Knowing you have a very musical background, I have to ask you, and I did not plan this question in the slightest bit, but I have to know, what is your favorite musical?
Ooh. I would have to say it's a tie between Wicked and Hamilton, because Wicked was, like, one of the first that I was like, I need to see this on Broadway. And ironically, I actually saw Hamilton first. I saw most of the original cast when I was, you know, with Master Ryan in New York, and I spent $800 on this ticket, and I was like, I'm insane. Like, why did I just spend this money? But it was like, again, Lin-Manuel Miranda had just left, and I was like, if I don't see these people now, like, I'm never going to see these people. And I had the best time of my life sitting next to this little old lady who, again, had bought the other seat, you know, and we had a blast. But I think Wicked, for me, hits a lot of personal, you know, chords, because, you know, being the young bullied kid and growing up, and then all of a sudden it's like you're discovering yourself and what you stand for and everything. That really, so I was kind of excited for the movie this year.
So as someone who saw it on Broadway and also saw the movie, did the movie hold up to the Broadway play?
Yeah, and I actually think, because I also read the book, so I think the movie did a really good job of marrying aspects of the book and aspects of the musical really, really well. And plus, I mean, Cynthia Erivo has just one of the best voices on the planet. I mean, my God, like, you cannot compare her voice, I think, to anybody else. Because I also watched her, like, YouTube videos from when she was in The Color Purple, which is a musical I also really love. And I was like, dang, that girl can sing. So
and she's so tiny too. It's like, how do you fit all that voice in that tiny little body? Like, it's even more powerful to watch.
It's amazing. And that's the part that I love about singing, is like, you hear someone's heart, right? Like, you get to just hear everything that is them when they sing.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and telling your whole story. It was amazing. And I know that I didn't even get to cover all the stuff I wanted to cover. And that means that at some point there's just going to have to be a part 2, because you have such a vast life with so much experience and so much to teach the young women and young men even of this industry, and maybe even the old ones too, if they're still willing to learn. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. This was amazing. And I genuinely cannot wait until the next time.
I am so excited. I can't wait. Anytime.
We'll definitely have to do it again for sure.
I was going to say, our
Guys,
car girls got to stick together.
Oh, yeah. Guys, remember to light it up while you're out in the world this week. I'm Shasta. That is Erica. We'll catch you next time on the I'm a Car Chick podcast.